Hey everyone, I am here with Levi Sanders running to represent New Hampshire's 1st congressional district. Levi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
Yeah, it's really exciting that there is so many progressives running. I remember in 2016, I could count the number of progressive congressional candidates on my hand, and now I can't keep track. So it's a really great problem to have. And you're running in a race that has to be one of the most interesting this year because it is one of the most competitive districts in the country. Donald Trump won that race in 2016, or he took that district. And there's 19 candidates running. You are one of 11 Democrats running. So why jump into a seemingly chaotic situation? Because I know that the individual who holds that seat, her name is Carol Shea Porter. She won in 2016 and is stepping down 2 years later. So what made you want to get into the race?
As you said, Michael, this is an open race. So Carol Shea Porter did a really great job. Decided that she was not going to run again, and I just thought about all of the issues and all the concerns that folks in New Hampshire are facing. I felt like I'd be a great candidate to run. I believe in a Medicare for all healthcare system that guarantees healthcare to every man, woman, and child without out-of-pocket expenses. I believe in tuition-free public colleges and universities. We now have a situation, if you can actually believe this, Michael, in New Hampshire right now, it costs $33,750 to go to a state school. It's unbelievable.
That's completely unbelievable.
Also, we have to address the issue of paid equity for women. We are in 2018, and women get paid 79 cents to the dollar. For African American, as Hispanic women, it's far, far lower. So obviously, women deserve the whole dollar. Additionally, we have to deal with the issue right now in terms of minimum wage. The minimum wage in New Hampshire is $7.25 an hour. We need to have a $15 minimum wage. If you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. We also have to deal with the issue of income and wealth inequality. There's two unbelievable things, Michael, which was going on, which is just unbelievable. It's almost like third world country. You have 47% of Americans who have $400 to address a medical emergency and or simply if their car breaks down. Just think about that. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and yet we have this unbelievable, just incredible situations going on. Furthermore, 75% of Americans have $700 to address a similar issue. So, I've been working in legal services now for 18 years, representing folks in a variety of different areas of law, including housing law, Social Security law, public benefits law, shelter law, veterans law, a host of other areas. And I just thought I am the best candidate right now to take on the two folks who are the establishment Democrats. And and I just really, really believe that I have the passion, the energy, and the skills to be the next congressman.
Great. Just for a point of clarification, when it comes to the gender pay gap, the 79-cent figure that you cited, a lot of people have looked at that methodology and found out that the actual pay gap is more along the lines of 4 to 6 cents. But I still think that tackling that is really important because that adds up over time. So any inequality in pay certainly needs to be addressed. And you touched on a great point in that the difference between white women and women of color is a lot larger. So definitely, these are things that I hear normal Americans talking about that it seems like the Democratic Party itself isn't necessarily addressing, but now we have this wave of progressive candidates coming in, yourself included. And one thing that I wanted to ask you, though, because there are 11 Democrats, there are 10 other opponents that you have in this race, so it's very chaotic. And what I've noticed is that more establishment, pro-corporate Democrats, they've adopted the rhetoric that progressives use. So, for example, DNC Chairman Tom Perez, he'll say healthcare is a right. When you push him on that and ask him, does that mean Medicare for all? He kind of dodges the question. So
That's right.
How do people in New Hampshire, one, understand that you are the more progressive candidate, that you're basically the go-to individual, you're the Bernie-crat, you're the progressive?
Right.
How do you get that message across in a race that is so saturated by Democrats?
Great point. Well, first off, I've been endorsed by the Democrats, so I feel very fortunate about that. But as you said, what goes on with a lot of establishment folks is they talk about the issue of access to health care. Michael, you can have access to $1 million yacht. That doesn't mean you can actually afford it.
Exactly.
And that's a really important point that you really have to articulate, and you're absolutely correct. When people talk about universal health care, or that we want to assure that everybody has the ability to get health care, you have to listen to folks. Until they talk about Medicare for all, a single payer health care, they're not really, they're being disingenuous.
Right, that's free at the point of delivery specifically.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. He's talking about the issue of no co-payments, no deductibles, and no premiums. That's where you're listening to. We know, even in addition to that, Michael, right now we have a scenario in terms on Medicare. What's incredible about Medicare is, I listen to so many seniors, I talk to so many seniors, and they talk about the fact that Medicare does not provide glasses. It does not provide vision care. It does not provide dentures. It does not provide dental care. It doesn't provide hearing aids. Hearing aids can cost you $15,000. So under a Medicare for all healthcare system, all that will be covered. Furthermore, the issue of dental care will also be covered, which, as you know, is so extraordinary. It's so needed throughout the country, and in particular here in New Hampshire.
Right, absolutely. And I wanted to talk to you about the dynamics in this race. Your campaign has gotten national coverage, but it's because you have a father who's the most popular politician in the country, Bernie Sanders. But it's not like this race is easy for you by any stretch of the imagination. Voter data, it costs, what is it? I think that
$37,500. That's exactly right. So you had 4 out of 11 folks right now in this race who decided to take that. So you have 7 candidates who decided they were not going to take it, either because economically they couldn't afford it, or they just thought it was just outrageous that everybody should not have that opportunity. So you're absolutely right. It's the most expensive anywhere in the country.
So what are the other disadvantages that you're facing? Because I know that debates are an issue. It seems like nobody wants to come together for a debate, which is,
right.
I mean, if you have ideas and you want to run, wouldn't you want to express them? So can you kind of talk about what's going on in this race and some of the biggest hurdles that you're facing?
Sure. Not just me, lack of debates. We have a situation where the New Hampshire Democratic Party decided that they will not have any debates. That is antithetical to democracy. As I hear from so many people, everybody that I talk to say, we want a debate. We want you to be able to differentiate between the other 10 candidates in the race, but also we want the strongest Democrat to take on the Republican in the general election.
So I do want to ask you about the similarities between your race and the 2016 election, because anyone who's progressive knows that the DNC essentially rigged it against your dad, Bernie Sanders. They made it so that way the DNC held debates during national sporting events, during the holidays. We know about the joint fundraising agreement from Donna Brazile that allowed Hillary Clinton, before she even became the official nominee, to take control of the DNC's funding and their press releases. So are there any similarities between your race and 2016?
Yeah, there are. First of all, what's really remarkable is that my father got 65 to 70% of the vote in District 1. So a lot of people kind of see, and I listen to people, and they say, oh my goodness, Levi, this is having the same things happen all over again. We have a scenario where the New Hampshire Democratic Party will not sponsor one debate. Not one debate. We have serious issues regarding difference between Medicare for all, the issue of access to health care, the Affordable Care Act, $15 minimum wage, $12 minimum wage. So these are really issues that people are really want to hear from the candidates so they can differentiate themselves. In addition, obviously, it costs $37,500 in order to get a voter checklist, which is extremely important. And just the whole entire process about how difficult it is to be able to communicate effectively with the New Hampshire Democratic Party. So there's just a whole lot of things which are so similar. You think they would have learned this thing, but they've decided to act the same exact way that occurred in 2016.
Has there been anyone from the DCCC that has basically subtly suggested that maybe you drop out, because we learned about the Levi Tillman incident in Colorado where they were trying to get him to drop out. Steny Hoyer was wanting him to exit the race in favor of Jason Crow. Anything like that going on?
Well, the DCCC did contact me. I decided I didn't really get back in contact with them, but I can't say that. I can say ultimately that they're not too excited about a Medicare for all healthcare system. And we know, as I said before, that Chris Pappas, they were working with Chris Pappas in 2015 in terms of robocalls, and they've given $2,500 to Maura Sullivan. So clearly they want the Democratic establishment definitively. They don't want somebody who believes in tuition-free public college universities, Medicare for all, a $15 minimum wage, as well as talk about what's going on with income and wealth inequality. I can definitively tell you that, Michael.
I do want to ask you about organizations like Justice Democrats, Our Revolution. Are they responding to you? Can you talk a little bit about the organizations that are kind of at play here?
Well, right now, I've got tremendous endorsements from a lot of folks. I got a Ro Khanna, who was an expert on Medicare for all. And as you know, we're incredibly doing some really great work in terms of the healthcare caucus. We have 17 members of the House. We have either I can't take your job, but it's either 17 or 18 folks in the Senate who believe in a Medicare for all healthcare system, and also virtually every single presidential candidate in 2020 who's running for Democrat believes in a Medicare for all healthcare system. So we're making tremendous progress. Furthermore, we have 59% right now of Americans who believe that we have a Medicare for all healthcare system. And yet, the two candidates who are getting the most recognition because of how much money they've spent are getting, simply don't believe in a Medicare for all healthcare system. And they talk about the issue of access to health care, or they talk about the Affordable Care Act. And the reason why it's important to differentiate between the Affordable Care Act and Medicare for all, the Affordable Care Act did a really good job of getting people insured. But the problem ultimately is that people's co-payments, deductibles, and premiums are just way too high. And we know that premiums are just soaring. So that's why we definitively need a Medicare for all single-payer healthcare system.
Right, and I like that you are unequivocally saying Medicare for all. You're not saying, well, maybe we'll move there one day, we'll start with a public option and then get there. I mean, I think the time has come to where nobody in America dies or goes bankrupt because they don't have insurance, or they have insurance, but the deductible is too high, or it's too expensive and they can't afford it. And maybe they lose their insurance because they change jobs. So yeah, I like that now there's really this momentum for Medicare for all like I've ever seen. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and for the most part, I've always been in support of Medicare for all. But now I've never seen this grassroots push. I've never seen candidates running for Congress running just unequivocally on Medicare for all. And it's really exciting. Now, even if we have a bunch of candidates running for Medicare for all, one thing that is always interesting to me is that there's a lot of corporate money being spent. I think that the reason why your opponents don't like Medicare for all is probably because they're taking money from health insurance industry companies and whatnot. But what I wanted to ask you is, you're not taking any corporate PAC money. So
that's right.
Why do you feel disadvantaging yourself? Because that's what's happening. If you're not taking this much money, and your opponent raised what, 1.5 million, you said?
Yep.
So why is it?
And the other person probably raised about 700,000 approximately.
That's absurd for a House race. Why do you feel as though it's so important to not take the money and to disadvantage yourself? Why is that so important to you? And if you get elected, what can we do to stop money in politics?
Good. Well, basically because Citizens United is a complete disaster. You have a scenario where the Supreme Court determined that corporations are people, Michael. I have never met a corporation who's a person, but you can introduce me to somebody in terms of a corporation, but a corporation is not a person. So that's the first issue. So we need to get money out of politics. And that's why it's so important that we have campaign finance reform, and that we have a 28th Amendment that says it's one person, one vote. So I feel very proud in terms of all of the donations that I've gotten from folks throughout the country, including in New Hampshire. And that's the way we got to run it, because I don't want to be beholden to corporation and special interest.
Right. And that's super important. And because you're not taking corporate money, it's really easy for you to come out here and endorse very popular policies that would otherwise offend corporate donors in the event you had them. I mean, Medicare for All is obviously one of them, tuition-free public college. Now, I want to ask you, because this is something that we're hearing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When she was elected, she was asked this. Your dad, Bernie, is always asked this. How are you going to pay for this? They never ask this about wars, right? But they always ask progressives when we want to help people, how are you going to pay for this? So in the event you're elected, you get, an interview on MSNBC, Fox News. How do you respond to that question? Because I feel like there needs to be a consensus in terms of how progressives address this.
Sure. Well, the first issue is that it's not a debate because people are more important than money. Mm-hmm. So we definitively have to pay for it because, as you know, Michael, we've had situations, horror stories where folks one woman decided she didn't even want to go to an ambulance when she had a horrible accident that occurred on the T in Boston. And another situation, I think you saw it today, in terms of somebody who died as a result of somebody in the ambulance, a driver or whatever, thinking that they couldn't even afford it. So that's the first issue. But basically, the way we pay, let's look at a couple of things. Right now, corporations are just ripping people off left and right. We know that a quarter of corporations don't pay anything in taxes. Amazon gets a tax rebate, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to address that issue. We deal with the military-industrial complex. We have to look at, there's so many other ways in terms of where there's just so much tremendous waste. Right now, a third of the cost right now in terms of the private healthcare system right now is as a result of administrative fees. So we need to get rid of it. When we get rid of all that paperwork, Michael, as you know, we're going to save 33%. So I could talk for hours on this issue, but the simple fact is it's about priorities. Mm-hmm. And the simple fact is that people are demanding that they're not going to go bankrupt. They're not going to have profound levels of anxiety. That they're going to wait 8 to 12 weeks, sometimes even to go to a doctor because they're terrified that they're going to get an exorbitant bill. But also, Mike, when we talk about paying for it, we have to look, objectively speaking, that small business owners are in favor of Medicare for all healthcare. Even somebody such as a Warren Buffett or General Motors or billionaires, because they understand how incredibly expensive it is to their business. So all I can tell you right now is a lot of folks are really interested. We're going to work more in terms of more of the economics. But overall, I can tell you that it's definitely something that can be paid. And the most important thing ultimately to understand is this: when people say, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be really costly," let's analyze it. Right now, it costs anywhere between say $17,000, $18,000, say for a family of four, to have health insurance. Well, what happens if you're only paying $5,000 a year? You're saving $13,000. So overall, people are going to benefit. And when people understand that, they understand that they are going to get so much more. They're not going to pay with co-payments, deductibles, and premiums. I assure you that people will feel that much more confident about the healthcare system.
So getting into other policy issues, can you talk a little bit about tuition-free public colleges and universities?
Yeah, as I mentioned, right here in New Hampshire, we have the most expensive college in the country. We have a situation where it's $33,750 actually to go to the university. It's actually University of New Hampshire. And when I hear from so many folks, particularly college students, they are absolutely adamant that we need a tuition-free public college and university. But we also have to deal with the issue of student debt. There's no reason why a student should be paying more than 3% in terms of a loan. We have a scenario where people are increasingly just choosing not to go to college and or university because their anxiety is that when they're done after 4 years, they're going to have just an extraordinary debt, and they may be paying it off for 15 or 20 years. So we need to encourage folks to go to college and or to go to university. And we know very clearly that if you go to college and or to university, you will make a lot more money than if, obviously you have a high school education. And what's really remarkable is that a college education is pretty much what a high school education was, 15 or years ago. So it's essential that everybody have a college education. However, if you choose not to have a college education or something you just decide you're not going to do, you should have the opportunity to go to trade schools or technical schools, which will allow folks to make $18-20 an hour as a plumber and or electrician. Not only does it make economic sense, but it's also the right thing to do.
And on the subject of school loans that already exist, would you be in favor of student loan debt cancellation? Because this is something that I've been hearing increasingly more from progressives. We have a Green Party candidate, Kenneth Mejia, who's proposing this.
Yep.
We have a Democrat in Hawaii, Kaniala Ing, who's proposing this. What do you think about that particular issue?
Well, I love it. I think it's a great idea. I have to look at it in terms of how that's going to work in terms of be successful to get it passed in the United States Congress. But I think it's a really great idea. I'd have to look at it more in depth. But clearly, of course, we need to make it as easy as possible for people to get out of debt. So there's a lot of different options, but I think it's definitely an option to consider.
So you're definitely open to it, though.
I'm absolutely open to the suggestion. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Because I do like the talk of tuition-free public colleges and universities, because I think at this point that's kind of a common sense thing given the state of the economy and how you need an education to get a better job and make more money ultimately. But I feel like a lot of the solutions that we see proposed for individuals already in debt is just like capping the payments or
right.
lowering the interest rates. And
right.
I think that it's a little bit easier to basically communicate a message that will really resonate with students if you just say something simple like student loan debt cancellation, because it's simple, it's easy, it's marketable. And I think that it makes sense. I think it's fair given this economy and how much school costs.
It does. And not only that, but it also makes economic sense. That's the most important thing. When somebody graduates from college, they're going to make more money, and therefore they're going to spend more in the economy, and the economy is going to do a lot more. We know that wealthy folks, they take their money and either they buy a yacht or they go to the Cayman Islands.
Right.
So it's absolutely worthwhile, and overall it helps the economy in innumerable ways when you have a college education.
Oh, 100%. So you've got my endorsement, but if people watching this are sold and they don't live in New Hampshire, what can they do to help you? Can we phone bank for you across the country? And if we do live in New Hampshire, what would be the best way to get you elected?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, obviously, is sandersforcongress.com. We don't take any money from corporation or lobbyists, so whatever folks could do in that area in terms of provide any type of contributions would be wonderful. Also, we would love to have volunteers. So again, they just go right to that website and they can sign up to become a volunteer.
Perfect. Well, I want to close with one last question. So in an interview with Chris Cuomo on CNN, your dad, Bernie Sanders, was asked if he would endorse you, and he said no, he's against political dynasties.
Your son's running for Congress. You say, I won't endorse him because I don't like dynastic politics. Why? It's only two of you. I got two in my own family. That's no dynasty.
Well, actually, I have more than two. My son is running on Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage. He's running on programs that
He's like a better-looking Bernie, that guy.
I think that, I don't believe in dynastic politics. He's on his own. He's going to speak to the people of New Hampshire, and I'm sure he's going to do very well.
So let me ask you this. Are you, as a congressional candidate, willing to endorse your dad's senatorial bid for 2018?
Wow, man, it's complicated. See, I don't believe in dynastic politics either, but yeah. Let me say, so I wanted people, because what happens at CNN, they always ask me in terms of, you're so similar to your father. Let me differentiate myself from my father. I have a size 14 sneaker. He's got 11 and a half. I'm 6'2.5", and he's only 6 feet. But here's the things that we're similar. We both are related to Larry David. That's why we have such a profound personality. That's why we have such a great sense of humor. So he's a third cousin of Larry, and I'm a fourth cousin. But no, I think what my father has done is really extraordinary in terms of him really talking about these issues that now are all over the country regarding Medicare for all, tuition-free public colleges and universities, paid equity for women, paid family and medical leave, a $15 minimum wage, in addressing the very serious issue in terms of income and wealth inequality. But you know what? My father doesn't really need endorsement. He's doing pretty well, and I think there's probably, I think you can bet on Bernie Sanders to win for United States Senate in 2018.
That's fair enough. I think that I think he'll do okay. Being the most popular politician in the country kind of gives you, a slight advantage.
Yeah, I would say just a tinch, but I would agree with you. I think he's probably like 75, 76% in terms of favorability rating. So yeah, he's doing pretty well.
That's remarkable. Well, thank you so much, Levi, for coming on the program. I appreciate it, and I will be watching this race. I would encourage others to do so because it is really crazy. Yeah, so hopefully you could pull this off. When's the primary?
September 11th.
September 11th. Okay, we'll be keeping an eye on that.
That unto itself is a crazy time to have a primary.
Right.
But anyways, but yeah, so it is September 11th, and really this, as I said, this campaign is going to come down to the fact, about Medicare for all, as well as tuition-free public colleges and universities, a $15 minimum wage, and addressing what's going on in terms of income and wealth inequality, as you know, which is getting outrageous. You now have a situation where 3 people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America. And we have a guy named Sheldon Adelson who gave $30 million to the Republican Party, but that's nothing. The Koch brothers are going to spend $400 million in 2018 to try to elect Republicans. So that's why it's so important to go to SandersForCongress.com and donate whatever you can.
Yeah, give to progressives who need it and fight the machine. So thanks for coming on, Levi.
Thank you so much.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.